Howdy, film lovers. Shasta College students. Shasta High. Um, it is Wednesday, October 7th. Do we have the book yet? Writing About Movies. Please get that book. Does it cost much? It's going to be handy. I keep bringing this book up for the essays because I'm still having some same issues with some of your essays. This will give you some how to formally analyze a film. And once again, I'm not asking for your personal opinion of a review, let's say, whether you give it a thumbs up or thumbs down. That's not what I'm concerned with. I want you to look at it, take notes, and tell me why you think this film works or doesn't work as a groundbreaking film from a certain, whatever decade we're doing. This week, we're going to do the 50s. I'm going to assign a film at the end of this lecture. And once again, it'll be our fourth essay, I think, fourth. And you'll write your essay. And please refer to this little book. For example, on page 40, in general, whatever you prepare a formal analysis of a scene, use film grammar. Start by considering the filmmaker's intent. Is that too detailed for you guys? Remember, the filmmakers use every cinematic tool at their disposal. Very little in any movie is left by chance. So before analyzing a scene, first ask yourself these basic questions. Now, this goes for the earliest silent films up until the modern superhero films. What is the scene about? So you're trying to break down a scene in Citizen Kane where he's talking to his would-be, the woman that's going to be his wife. They've just met on the city street. He's married to somebody else. He's not happy in that marriage. And they're in a parlor together. And I got to remember, this is like the 1920s. And so things are a little different. They're not like they are now. They're not going to jump into bed like we do now. So we don't do that so much with the pandemic. But it's more formal. It's still the mores of the day. What are those in 1928? Well, people just don't hop into bed with strangers or married men. So what is the scene about in that scene? When she's got a toothache and he's trying to amuse her so she won't think about the toothache. And so he's having a good time. He's relaxed a little. He's a middle-aged, overweight man, and she doesn't know who he is. That's unusual. Wow, she doesn't even know that he's the great Kane, Charles Emerson Kane. She doesn't know that. And that's unusual because he's a celebrity in those days. This is long before YouTube and everywhere else where we knew our celebrities very well. After watching the scene with her, what do you understand about the character's thoughts and emotions? What's she thinking? He's an amusing older man who looks like he might be wealthy. She is amused by it because the toothache does go away. He's amused by her because she's kind of naive. She's honest, kind of down to earth. She leaves the door open. Remember, she's not going to be in the room alone with him without the door open. So what's he thinking? What is she thinking? Just think about that for a second. How did the scene make you feel? Do you get the scene? Do you understand it? Did it go over your head? Did nothing compute, or did it all compute? Is their relationship starting then? Yes, it is. What tools and techniques did the filmmakers use in order to convey those feelings? What are those elements? Now, this is not a filmmaking class, but you kind of need to know how movies are constructed. First thing about a movie you should know is the script. Is the script telling us what we need to know in the scene? Is it well written? Is the dialogue interesting? Boring? Is it funny? Is it cute? Does it seem real? Does it seem none of that stuff? Write that. Did any of the expectations of the movie, were any of your expectations, what were they? Now, a lot of you do write about your expectations before you watch it. And that's usually, I'm going to be bored to death. It's in black and white. There's no sound. I don't get these old-timey movies. I get it. That's your expectations. But try to take that modern look, your contemporary filmmaker, film viewing critical mind off it, and look at what it's like to look at this film that was made in 1941. We're not in war yet. We haven't gone to World War II yet. We just came out of the Great Depression. Think about your age, however old you are, you're millennial, Gen Z, God forbid you're older. And how does it make you feel? Do you understand it? Do you get it? Try not to compare it to modern movies, because it's not going to work. You can't do it. It's literally not fair. They didn't have the technology, but they had great technology and they had great artists. Let me tell you, Greg Toland, who did the cinematography, was a master, and he'd be a master now. Most cinematographers probably couldn't even do what he did then. Now, with all sorts of digital help from computers and stuff, they didn't have any of that in those days. So how did they convey the images that Orson Welles, the director, wanted him to convey the story? So there's a lot of shots where the camera's really low, looking up. You see the ceiling, you see the actors at an odd angle. They're always, the camera's looking up at them. Why do you think he's doing that? You don't have to be right. You're not, just how's it make you feel? What do you think they're doing? There's no right or wrong in these essays, but there is, meaning you could get it wrong. Oh, I think he's doing it because he's trying to make him appear like a little man. Well, that's probably not right. He's trying to make him look like a big man. He's big. We're looking up at him, aren't we? In film, when you want to look at somebody who's larger than life, we always put them up higher, on a higher plane. You want to look down at somebody, it's really simple physics. You look down at them. So when he's giving his speeches, usually he's looking down at everybody because he is the man. This is Orson Welles' character. Some of you had trouble of the essays with understanding what the titles are. It happened one night. What does that really mean? Is it literal? Public Enemy. What does that mean? Some of you actually wrote about it. That's great. Think about it. Do titled movies have to be literal? Do they have to describe perfectly the movie you're about to watch? I mean, really, if you think about it, the last X-Men movie is called X-Men Exodus. What does that even mean? Whatever it was called. Sorry, I'm botching that. But it's exit, Spider-Man 5. What does that title tell you? Not much. It tells you it's going to be another sequel to Spider-Man. Should movie titles be artistically presented to us to make us feel something, a desire to see the story? I love movie titles. I don't like new movie titles very often. They're not very good. They're either too literal, or they're don't make any sense to me. And so a movie like Citizen Kane, why is it called Citizen Kane? Why isn't it called Newspaper Man, Yellow Journalism? Or why isn't it called The Rise and Fall of a Rich Guy? Why Citizen Kane? Why do you think? Hang on, let me get a drink of water. You don't have to be right. Just think about it. I'm trying to get you to critically think about these films in a deeper level than whether you think it's cool or not. Another thing, don't use so many adjectives to describe things. It's an awesome film. It's great cinematography. It's wonderful script. What does that mean? Those are just empty words to me. That's not describing anything. Describe why it's awesome. Describe why it's disturbing or it's great. What makes it great? That's what I'm looking for, not just an overall, it's great, I love it. It's no wonder it's a classic. Okay, that doesn't tell me anything about what you saw in the film. Try to keep the adjectives down to a smaller level. If you use them, explain it. Say the film is awesome because I feel he captured the inner workings of this newspaper man who was born wealthy, but he was actually trying to do the right thing. And he was never loved, and he was trying to buy love. He couldn't even buy the election or the love of his wife. He lost everything. That will describe why you think the story is good or great or indifferent. Why is the camera work awesome? The deep focus that Greg Toland brings to Citizen Kane pulls you into the story in a way that engaged me fully into the cinema landscape that Orson Welles has created. Something like that. I'm just off the top of my head now. I've analyzed 1 million films in my life. I analyze them every minute. I watch movies all the time. And I'm always in my head, how could they do this better? Why is he putting the camera there? So much stuff right now to me. The directing is generic. It's so many modern Hollywoods movies are being directed by committee. But these older films from this old age of black and white films are directed by something I haven't talked about yet because we're not quite there yet, but the auteur filmmaker. Auteur is a French term for author of your own work. That started in the 50s. The French created that. That's a French word again. Once again, the French are creating our cinema language. And there's a lot of directors like Orson Welles, like Alfred Hitchcock, like Billy Wilder, like John Huston, Elia Kazan. They're the author of their own films. It's their stamp, their personal stamp. And they have a personal stamp. It's their perceived notions on how to tell a story. And it's different than the next director. If some other director directed Citizen Kane, it would have been a wholly different movie. Only Orson Welles, that was his vision. He was the author of his own vision. That was rare in Hollywood because Hollywood is a studio system and you're hired as a hired hand to direct the next movie. And you're hired because you bring movies in on time and maybe your movies make some money, hopefully, and you know how to get the shots done and get the movie up and made and do the next movie. I mentioned once before, during the studio system, in 1 year, John Ford directed 3 movies. Think about that, folks, 3 movies in 1 year. Now it takes 3 to 5 years to direct 1 movie. Because the studio system in those days was a factory, just like building an automobile. Went from here to here to here. And when you're building this movie here, that means all the technical aspects is being built, meaning the lighting, the sets are being built, they're being painted, the costumes are being made, the casting is happening. That's all happening over here in this area of the studio. You're hired as the director. You're going to come into the middle of that when a lot of that stuff's already done, and you're going to direct another movie as soon as this one's over. Maybe you'll have a 2-week off, and already on the other side of the studio, the stuff for the next movie is being created. The sets, the costuming, the casting is being done. And then after you have your 2-week vacay, you go to that movie and it's ready to go. Then the next movie is being prepared for you to direct it. So you can do a lot of work and crank out a lot of really impressive work. And they did. So it's a machine. In the 1950s, this kind of slowed down a bit. The studios were losing control. TV was coming around. People were staying home in droves. Studios were actually starting to sell off some of their properties because they weren't making the money they used to. And the rise of the auteur director was very prevalent. It started in Europe with people like, and Japan, like Akira Kurosawa, and Italy, and Federico Fellini, and Ingmar Bergman in Sweden, Francois Truffaut in France. We'll talk about foreign films the next time, next Monday or whatever. And they are the authors of their own work. They have a personal stamp. It looks like a Hitchcock film. It walks and talks like a Francois Truffaut film. You can spot them. And so that's really key to these movies that came out of post-World War II. The director was having a more personal stamp on his films, or her films. Very few women, folks. And we'll get to that in a little bit. Not tonight. We will have a whole section on women directors, just not yet. So I want you to look at, when you look at a movie like Citizen Kane, I know the essays are already due. That's the kind of thing I'm looking for. And it really helps, if you haven't bought this book, to refer to it. It tells you, here's a, like, just for example, I turn to this page, 208, there's a scene from Citizen Kane. They use it all the time in these film books. And it explains to you what deep focus is, cinematography. That's all that movie is deep focus. And if you read this book, saw the movie, you'd be able to write about deep focus as part of your analysis. That makes you look really smart. Depth of field, design. How's it designed? How is that shot designed? You've seen the shot from Citizen Kane. You know this is his mother. Look where she's standing. Look where the father's standing. And he's the weaker position in the frame. Look at the frame. What's back here? The ugly banker. He's all uptight, the banker. The kid, she's yelling to the kid who's playing with a sled outside. And then you look at it and you go, why is she so austere? Look at her hair. She's like an uptight school marm. She's strict, but she cares deeply for her son. She doesn't like this. He's out playing in the snow. He's innocent. He's playing in the snow. He's having a good life. But because they've got rich suddenly, they think it's best that he goes back east and is educated. Okay? Well, the dad doesn't want that. He fights for it, right? You don't want to take my boy away from me. This is the evil banker who's going to take care of him and take care of the money and raise Charles Kane in luxury. And Charles Kane has nothing but animosity towards him for the rest of the movie. Do you remember it now? Now, you're going, is she just a cold-hearted woman getting rid of him? No, it's killing her. You see it in Agnes Moorehead's eyes. And then we find out later that the father's not such a great guy. Because when the little child assaults the banker with the sled, do you remember the scene? Why do you think that happened? He pushes him down into the snow and the dad tries to spank him. And he runs and hides behind the mother. And she goes, that's why I'm getting him away from you. That's why we're sending him to these schools back east. That gives a hint that the father has abused that boy before. Now, it's subtle, but it's there. And that's the genius of a great script and a cameraman that's putting those scenes together and the actors who have to convey those scenes. He's been abused. She's doing the only thing she feels she could do. She's not going to leave this abusive husband, but she's going to get rid of her kid and save him. So there's a sample, and you can look. You look at these books and you reference these books, and then you go back and write your paper. Yes, you can also do the research online. It helps. It helps to research what makes Citizen Kane great. There's a ton of documentaries on it. You should watch those before you write your paper. Another angle, and this is the last thing I'm going to say about the essays right now, is please, I say 3-page minimum. That's a discipline. Most of you are still not writing 3 pages, and I do take a point off or two for that. Because when I say 3 pages, please write 3 complete pages, all the way down to the end of the page. 4 pages is fine. 5 pages is even better. That's great, but at least 3. It shows to me that you're putting in some work and effort. You have a whole week to do this. I'm going to sign a paper today. You'll be able to see the movie in the next couple of days, and you'll have 4 or 5 days to write it. That should be plenty. But I know we're busy. We got jobs, we got families, we got obligations. I get it. A lot of you will, because I get these texts at the very last minute that I know the paper's due in 6 hours. What was the movie again? Yikes. How are you going to write a paper and watch the movie in 6 hours? I don't know. It's not going to be very good. I don't believe. Anywho, please keep in on the essays. Keep using your noggin. Keep critically analyzing what makes these scenes work. A lot of stuff, a lot of thought and planning go into these things. They aren't just by accident. Okay? Anyway, I talked way too long about that. Sorry. The other thing I wanted to talk about was your journals. Hopefully you're keeping up with the journals. I got a feeling most of you maybe aren't. The journal was assigned. I will be putting up samples of the journal. Look for it in announcements. You'll see what I'm looking for. The journal should have an entry for every week we do something. What did we do on Monday? What did we do on Wednesday? What was my lecture? I want to make sure you guys are watching these lectures. And it will let me know that you paid attention to the lectures. You know, Mr. Thompson rambled on and on about the essays. Mr. Thompson talked about Citizen Kane, held the book up. He had a weird scarf on. Well, this is my scarf I wear at Starbucks. I'm not robbing the place. This is what they want. Anyway, that lets me know you're looking at these essays, paying attention. Also, I wanted to make sure, because I know we're not in the classroom, and it's a little harder to keep on the readings on the book that you should have. I want you to read chapter 6. It starts on 217. It's called that's chapter 6, and it's the swollen story. That's the name of this chapter, and it covers from 1953 to 1959, and it covers a lot of films that aren't made in America, European films, because right now Europe is really busting at the seams. We just came out of the war, and we're getting films from India, Sweden, Italy, because they were suppressed during the war. Not anymore. The story needs to be told. And so that covers Akira Kurosawa, the great Japanese director who directed, maybe you've heard of it, The Seventh Samurai. Everybody should watch that in your lifetime. I might assign that as an essay. You never know. Beware. And he was bombed. They dropped the atom bomb in his country, and as soon as he got out of the war, and he started making movies again. And remember, folks, for 10 years, this little historical lesson, in Japan, our government ran Japan for the first 10 years after the war. They didn't have their own government. We ran it. So they had censorship. They had our military there. They didn't have a lot of freedoms, and yet they went out and made films with we were occupying force after the war. So all the stuff's going on out there in the cinema. Look at that book, read the chapter. The other thing, I assigned 2 videos. This is the book video, the DVDs. We'd be watching them in class, but we're not in class, of the book. This is the ones I sign on Canvas. And some, not Canvas, it's a sign, they're on Canopy. This whole documentary is on Canopy. I got it put on Canopy through Shasta College. And I signed some new chapters this week for you to watch. One of them was, it's called Sex and Melodrama. I'm not so sure I like that title. But it's all about 1950s filmmaking and these stars that I just talked about, changing everything. Method acting, talk about Marlon Brando, James Dean, etc. So you'll be able to see what I'm talking about, not just listening to my words. You read the book, you'll be able to read what I'm talking about. You'll watch the documentary, you'll see what I'm talking about. And then you look at this little book and you'll be able to write about what these films are doing and what I'm talking about. And you got it, man. That'll be it. It's a breeze after that. Okay. Anyway, on to my major topic, and I'll give it. I want you guys, I'm going to sign another documentary for you to watch. It's going to be on YouTube. It's a brief documentary on the House of Un-American Activities, which swept through Hollywood in the early 1950s, middle 50s, late 50s. Maybe you've heard about it. Maybe you've had a class in your history class that talked about it. But there was a time post-World War II when there was a lot of fear in this country that communism was going to spread through our democracy. And because in their manifesto, that's how they say, that's how they start dealing with people and trying to change their minds and saying how communism is better, the collective is better. And people thought, okay, that sounds pretty good. Because if you've ever read anything about Marxism, it sounds reasonable. Everybody gets an equal share. Everybody is treated the same way. Nobody's higher up. Everybody's on the same level. We're all accomplishing something. We're all helping each other. Yes, the dreaded, we get education, we get healthy, healthcare. That's all the evils of, supposedly the evils of Marxism. It just got corrupted. Guys like Lenin and Stalin, they corrupted it and became communism. And it became a military dictatorship, which Marxism was never supposed to be. And it was like for example, Marxism doesn't believe in private property. You don't get to own 5,000 acres in Montana and put a fence around it. How could human beings own property? Doesn't it belong to everybody? Okay, so it's what sounded kind of fair and even and balanced turned into a corrupt form of dictatorship coming out of China and Russia, which is now Soviet Union. And so a couple senators and our government, conservative senators, felt that Hollywood was a great place to get subversive messages out to the audience. And so they wanted to look at Hollywood closer. And so they started these hearings. They called them the hearings on un-American activities. Okay. And so they would bring in movie stars, big stars, mostly men, and they would go, have you ever been a communist, or do you know anybody who has been a communist? And if you say, no, I haven't, and I don't know anybody, you're off the hook. But people did know people who were communists. People in the 1930s, when we're in the Great Depression, a lot of young people, your age, felt that democracy, our government had let us down. Nobody had jobs. Nobody was eating. Nobody was paying their rent. And so Marxism and communism started sounding like a better way of life, a fairer way of life, a worker's way of life. The workers are all working together. Nobody's a boss. Nobody's got a higher elevated than the next person. We all have a say in it. And so a lot of these young impressionable minds joined the Communist Party in the 1930s. And most of them quit by the time we got into the 40s because they saw what communism really was. It wasn't this romantic ideal. It looked like a pretty grim proposition. And so they dropped out. And so a lot of these actors and writers had been members of the Communist Party. They paid dues, just like you pay dues to be a Democrat or Republican. Same deal. And except for it was a communist thing. And mostly it was artists, because artists are always kind of open to new ideas, I guess, than regular straight people. And so they had these un-American activities hearings. Well, what happened was it destroyed lives, it destroyed careers, and there was a thing called a blacklist. You didn't want to be on the blacklist, because if you went to the hearings and you said, yes, I was a communist, and if they said, well, do you know anybody else, and give us names, and if you said, no, I'm not essentially going to rat on my friends, you were put on a blacklist. And sometimes you were sent to jail. I want you guys to watch this old documentary on the Hollywood 10, they called them. They're writers, screenwriters, very successful screenwriters. And each of them, for contempt of court, served a year in prison. And when they came out, they didn't get their jobs were not there anymore. The studios weren't allowed to hire them, or they could be shut down. That's how powerful the government was, trying to control this communist under everybody's bed. That was the joke. There's a commie underneath your bed, looking to corrupt you and make you a slave drone of the state. And so it destroyed careers, and a lot of writers had to write under a different name. They made up a fake name, or they wrote using someone else's name. One of the great writers, Dalton Trumbull, who didn't name names. He spoke up for his rights, and he was given a year in prison for it. And he had written some major movies up until then. Well, now he can't write anything. He can't get hired. He's got 5 kids to support. He's a guy who's probably 45 years old. He doesn't know what to do. And so he starts writing movies under someone else's name. They called them fronts. And because he was blacklisted, the studios took advantage of that and didn't pay him his normal fee. You want to work, you usually get $100,000 for a script. You're going to get $10,000 now, and you're going to like it. So studios took advantage of it. And so he cranked out a lot of scripts. He won the Academy Award for a script he wrote. And on the night of the Academy Awards, another person using the fake name accepted the Academy Award. And that guy was just a hired actor to go in there and said, I am John Smith, I get this Academy Award. That's how bad it was. When this guy was blacklisted, he got the Oscar for Best Screenplay. It wasn't until a little bit later, when 2 powerful personalities, a director by the name of Auteur Filmmaker and an actor by the name of Kirk Douglas, came to Dalton Trumbull and said, listen, I want you to write my next script, and we're going to use your real name, and I'm going to stand up to any bullies that tries to take this away from us. Auteur Filmmaker did the same thing. They had the power to stand up, and it essentially broke the blacklist. Dalton Trumbull could have his name out there. People knew that he wrote the script because a powerful celebrity at the time, an actor, which was Kirk Douglas, and a director, Auteur Filmmaker, didn't back down. That's a bold stance. Another director, Elia Kazan, who directed On the Waterfront, Streetcar Named Desire, some of the best Brando movies ever made, Viva Zapata. He didn't do so good. He wanted to keep his career going. And so when they asked him to name names, he named names. And he was never blacklisted. He made some of the greatest movies in cinema history during the next 10 years. But he lost a lot of friends because they figured he ratted on his friends. Well, I read his book. He's a great writer, by the way. I mean, really, really vivid writer. and he explained what really happened. He said he didn't name any new names. Other people had named these people, and he was just saying yes to that. And so he felt those people had already been named. But here's the difference. He did name his friends. And some of them didn't ever work again because of that. And there's been more than enough proof that one or two of them committed suicide over it. So one of his best friends was the playwright Arthur Miller, who had written Death of a Salesman. And they who did not name names, by the way, and he was given a year in prison, but it was suspended on these un-American activities. And he broke his relationship with Elia Kazan until the very last minute. Elia Kazan was an old man now in his 80s. This would be in the 1990s, early 90s, and they wanted to give him a honorary Oscar. He'd already won the Oscar for On the Waterfront and Tree Grows in Brooklyn, but they wanted to give him a Lifetime Achievement Award. Well, a lot of people didn't like it. They felt he was still had named names, ruined lives, and he shouldn't be given this award. They had a little brief documentary where Arthur Miller came out and supported it. He said, I don't like what he did. I think he's paid the price for it, and I think he's earned this honorary Oscar. Some actors supported it. People like Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese, the director, and other actors wouldn't. They didn't support it. And when the Oscar was given to him, the camera pans out. You can watch this on YouTube. The camera pans out to the audience, and Nick Nolte, who was a big actor in those days, he refused to stand, refused to applaud. Ed Harris, if you know who that is, he's in Westworld, if you know that TV show. He didn't stand up. Most of the audience stood up and applauded. Some of them didn't. Steve Spielberg politely was doing this with a frown on his face, and his wife, so they weren't thrilled with it. Can somebody be forgiven? That's up to you. He did ruin lives, absolutely. Anyway, so that's how strong this committee was, and there was a guy who was the head of the committees, and McCarthy. Maybe you've heard the term McCarthyism, because he was accusing everybody of being a communist and against the government, and they found out later he was essentially a con man and a fake, and he was out to grab some glory by persecuting these Hollywood types. And he was found out, and he later died in disgrace. Now, maybe you've heard the term witch hunt recently. The person who's in the White House uses it a lot. Well, that's where the term comes from. It was a witch hunt. That's where it came from. They're called the communist witch hunts. Looking for those commie witches. I guess if you're a Republican witch or a Democrat witch, you're okay. But if you're a communist witch, look out. Anywho, Arthur Miller wrote a great play about this, and he was smart. And he said it in the time of our Protestant era, 1600s in this country, where we used to try women for witchcraft. We did that, folks. And guess what? We burned a couple of them at the stake. Because they were saying some stuff people didn't like. They said there's witches. They weren't witches. They had a brain of their own. They wanted to express themselves. That wasn't allowed. And so he wrote a clever play about the old witch hunt, and comparing it to the new witch hunt. And it was essentially is you cannot trust anybody. Even your best friend might sell you out. That's what and in this thing, these young girls sell out these people. Can't trust them. So I think that's all I got right now. Watch these documentaries. I'm going to put them out there. I'm going to sign a new essay. I have to find the movies first. We'll see where they are. I'll post them. You're probably going to watch, if I can find it, On the Waterfront with Marlon Brando, or the other class, both, because I'm doing 2 classes with this one lecture. Rebel Without a Cause by James Dean. I got to go find it on YouTube. Like I say, I usually show it in class, but I can't. So I'm sorry to say it. If you don't have a streaming service that has any of this stuff on there, you may have to pay $2 or $3 for it. My apologies. Remember this, though. We're not driving to school every day, so we are saving some gas money and wear and tear in our automobiles. So you might have to pay $3 to watch the movie. And guess what? Maybe you'll enjoy it. Never know. I will say this, though. This might pique your interest. Rebel Without a Cause is in color. Unbelievable. Anyway, enjoy the movies. Keep watching cinema. Keep questioning everything. Don't look at anything face value. Look what's underneath. In acting, in theater, because I've taught that too, we look at what they call the subtext. Here's the text. Here's the play. What's beneath the play? What's underneath there? You know what? A lot. Meaning, what's underneath the meaning of the words in that book? What's it really trying to say? They call it the subtext. So look for that in the movies. You'll see it if you know what you're looking for. On that, I rambled on longer than I usually do. Watch the thing. Watch the movies. Keep up on the assignments. And keep up on your journals. And I'll post some samples on announcements about the journals. That's it, folks. Till next time, remember, everything is cinema.